So our lecture today is mainly going to be on elasticity of demand, the concepts, and the applications. But for us to understand this, firstly, we'll have to have a recap of what we discussed last lecture under the theory of demand. So we expressed our understanding in this segment where we talked about demand being more than just a desire or a want. We said demand is the ability and the willingness to pay for a product or a service. And we talked about several factors that affect demand. So demand is affected by the following factors. Number one, we said demand is affected by the price of the commodity. Why? Because the price of the commodity, holding all things equal, is inversely related to its demand. So demand in nature is downsloping. It looks like this. Why? Because of the inverse relationship or negative relationship. When the price of a commodity goes up from P1 to P2, what happens? You demand less of that commodity from Q1 to Q2. So this is what we call the law of what? Of demand. So what is the law of demand? The law of demand stipulates that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Okay, so yeah, a number of factors that affect demand. Demand is affected by the following factors. Number one, the price of that particular commodity. So this is one of the most practical courses that you need to enjoy because it relates to your real life. If a commodity goes up, you demand less of it. If your commodity goes down, you demand more of it. So the base is usually bigger here because of the purchasing power increases as the price of the commodity goes down. The other factor that affects demand is the price of a substitute. We said a substitute is simply what? A good whose, we talked about a substitute is a good which can be used with equal ease in place of the other. Substitute goods, we talked about examples like Coke and Pepsi, a ball pen and ink pen, tea and coffee. So here, when one commodity becomes expensive, you switch to the other commodity. So we call that the substitution effect. So if the price of Coke goes up, you go and buy Pepsi because ultimately in your mind, you say these are the same things. So substitute goods have what is called a positive relationship. Why? Because if the price of one good goes up, the demand of the other good will go up. The price of Coke goes up, meaning you'll buy less of Coke, but you buy more of the other good, which is Pepsi. So this is why the demand curve is downsloping. So the other factor that affects demand, we said, was what? The price of a complementary good. And what is a complementary good? A complementary good is simply a good whose utility depends upon the availability of both goods. You can't use one good without the other. For instance, a ball pen and ink, a car and petrol, right? A phone and SIM card. So these ones move hand in hand, they're complementary. So these ones have an inverse relationship. Why? Because if the price of a car goes up, the demand of petrol will go down because you'll not buy a car after all. So these are called complementary goods. They are called complementary goods. So whenever the elasticity of a complementary good is negative, we say these are complementary goods. Okay, so the demand equation, like I said, is always downsloping. We talked about 8 factors to 9 factors, but we're going to dominate on 5 or 6 today. The other factor that affects the demand for a particular good, we said, was what? Income. Income is denoted by the letter Y or M or I itself. So income also has a special feature. We call that the income effect. So under income, we discussed to say we have 3 types of goods that are related to income. We have necessities, We have luxury goods and we have inferior goods. The necessities and the luxury goods are termed as normal goods because they have a direct relationship. When the income increases, you definitely need to increase demand for particular goods. So these ones, like food, once you have money, you want to buy more food. You want to buy more luxurious things. Now, the luxurious things are only bought with excess income. That's why the elasticity is usually kind of higher than 1. So we call those comfort or luxurious goods. We can do without aircon, but it's because we have extra money. So these ones are called normal goods. There's a particular good we discussed which has an inverse relationship, a negative relationship. It goes the opposite. When your income goes up, you demand less of it. It goes in reverse. We call that an inferior good. So inferior goods really are goods which you demand less of when your prices, when your income goes up. For instance, salaula. Obviously, if you have 30 to 50,000 kwacha of a salary increment from a 5,000 kwacha, you wouldn't want to find yourself in salaula because that becomes an inferior good. Also, the types of cars we want to buy, certain cars to others are inferior goods. Why? Because you're able to afford better. All right. So what other factors did you discuss that affect your demand? We talked about tastes and preferences. This is also a very key factor because no matter how much money you have, certain people will cling to certain kinds of foods. Others would switch their wardrobe and the kinds of foods they eat. And I hope not the church they go to. But in terms of tastes, this is an important parameter because under taste, we have 3 effects that I need you to know. There's what we call a bandwagon effect. This is an effect that comes about in a demonstration where buyers will get that particular good because everyone else is doing it. They want to move with the mob. There's also what we call the snob effect, which usually comes about because of prestige. People want to buy because they want to be in a certain class. And there's also what we call the Veblen effect, which comes about because you are only seeking for highly priced goods. The more expensive, the more you buy them. If they become cheap, you don't want to be like the ordinary people. So this is with regards to tastes and preferences. And other factors that affect demand are population, which is denoted by N. We know the higher the population, the more your demand. Also the composition. It's not only about the size, the composition. So if the composition is predominantly of children, you need to refocus your demand, your supply towards the children, like baby clothes or for these young generation that are growing. If it's that of the old, you need to position it towards those who are old. All right. Are we following? Are we moving together? Any questions this far before I proceed? Okay, great. Also, the level of income affects the demand for particular commodities. High earning income areas, IBEX, PHI, you'll discover that the demand for particular goods is high. All right. The composition is also important. How these high earning income bracket people, their composition. Other factors are sociological factors, whether sociological has to do basically in their backgrounds, education, marital status, kinds of goods they will demand. The weather conditions also are very paramount because they will determine what you're going to buy during a particular weather. If it's too hot, you buy more of ice cream. If it's too cold, or you buy more of jerseys. If it's raining, you buy umbrellas. Advertisement is another important element in demand theory. Government policy and expectations of future prices. When you are told that fuel will go up by midnight, you purchase more of those ones. Trade conditions consumer credit facilities. When you know that these ones will give us a credit facility, you buy more of them. So this is where our demand function is derived. So demand in terms of X is given by PX. M stands for the income, price of a substitute, price of a complementary test, and advertising. Now, let me take you briefly to a few calculations now. So let me start with what we call linear equations. The demand, the demanded, if it's given maybe for instance 100 minus what, 5p. How do we sketch this? For a layman, you put the letters on one side, q plus 5p is equal to 100. And what number is here? 1. So you identify the intercepts. So 1 into 100 is 100. So to cut the q at 100. 5 into 100, what do we get? 20. So to cut the p at 20. So if you're going to draw this, the p-axis is here and the q-axis is there. So on the p, we're going to cut at 20. Put your 20 there. On your q, we're going to cut at 100. So this is 100 there. So this makes our demand function P QD is equal to what? 100 minus 5p. So this is our demand function. I want somebody to try. This is an interactive class. I really need you to understand what we are doing. How do we plot this equation? Anyone? Let's see what we do. Come here. Shippy.
Yeah, so we arrange the equation, letters on one side and numbers on the other side. So P plus 2Q is equal to 20. Which automatically gives us a P as 20.
So there's a 1 there, right?
Yeah.
So 1 into 20 is 20.
And the Q is 10.
How did you get the 10?
20 divided by 2.
2 into 20.
Or 2. Yeah.
All right. Then how do we plot this?
So the P on the y-axis and the Q on the x-axis. Then on the P we cut 20 there. 20. Then on the Q 10.
So our demand function of what? P is called what? 10.
20 minus 2.
Minus what? 20 minus
20 minus
2Q.
2Q.
Correct. So there are certain times when you are given the function Q is equal to 2P. In this case, when you take this on the other side, it will be Q minus 2P is equal to what? 0. So there's a 1 there. 1 into 0, it is 0. Negative 2 into 0, it is still 0. So this one, it will just come from here, 0. Okay? So here we have P and Q. It's not going to cut any of these axes anywhere. Okay? So are we moving together? So I have now said that the law of demand stipulates that the higher the price, the lower the what? Quantity demanded. That is the law of what? Demand. Conversely, we have another law which is called the law of what? The law of supply. On the law of supply, it is the other way around. The higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. For supply, you need to understand that consumers or producers are more willing to supply at a higher price. So the supply is simply the quantity or commodity which producers are willing and able to offer at a particular price. So the law of supply simply states that the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. So supply is always upsloping. Why? Because if you're going to increase your price from P1 to P2, what will happen? Suppliers will be willing to supply more from Q1 to Q2. This is in a similar scenario that FRA has. When you hear FRA saying the floor price is high, more people will be encouraged to plant maize because they know that the price is higher, they'll supply more and they'll make more money. So there are some factors that affect supply that we need to know. What are some of the factors that affect supply? Number one, the price of the product. If the price is high, you supply more. If the price is low, you supply less. The other factor is the quantity, the quality or type of technology. If there's good technology, productivity will be high. The other factor is the weather conditions. So if the weather conditions are rainy and you're dealing with farming, you're going to produce more. But if you're dealing with mining, weather conditions will curtail your supply. The production, the supply of some products are affected by these weather conditions. So you need to also look at that. The other issues are government taxes. If there are high taxes, you will supply less. If there are producer subsidies, you produce more. And price of other goods like the substitute goods and complementary goods, these are very important in supply. Now, like I said, the law of demand is downsloping. The law of supply is upsloping. If you don't control these two guys, the supplier will always want to go up as much as possible. And the demand, you guys want discount as much as possible going downwards. But we need to meet halfway. That is what we call equilibrium. Equilibrium is simply the point where demand meets supply at this point here. So there are key components of this equation. There is what we call the consumer surplus, and there's what we call the producer surplus. All right. So if we have the following figures here, we have 2, here we have 7, and here we have 15. So we're being asked, how do we find the consumer surplus and the producer surplus? So this is our supply, and this is our demand, even before I use equations. The consumer surplus, the triangle looks like this one here. The producer surplus, the triangle looks like this one here. The base from here to here is 10. The height from here to here is what? 8. Then the height from here to here is what? 5. And the same base they're sharing is what? The 10. So the consumer surplus is given by half base times height. So our base is 10, and our height is what? From here to here, our height is what? 8. And the producer surplus, the base is being shared, it's the same, half BH. Our base is still 10, and our height is what? 5. So when you calculate that, half of 50 is 25. When you calculate this, half of 80 is 40. So our consumer surplus is 40, and our producer surplus is 25. So when we add this, we get the total surplus. When we add both the consumer surplus and the producer surplus, what we get is called the total surplus. And in this case, our total surplus is what? 65. So here is how we calculate these surpluses. I said equilibrium is simply a point where demand equates what? Supply. So at these 2 points, we can find the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So they will give you actual figures to say, suppose our P is 50 plus 2Q. And here we're given P is equal to 10 plus 3Q. So which one is the demand and which one is the supply? We know that demand always has a negative slope. So this one is demand because this is negative there. This one is supply because this one is positive here. So we've just realized that demand, or learned that demand is equal to supply at equilibrium. So we need to equate this. What is our demand? 10 minus 3Q. What is our supply? 50 plus what? 2Q. So here we solve them simultaneously. This 50 will be here. Okay. This is supposed to be plus, and this is supposed to be minus. Let's swap the signs. So this is supposed to be what? Minus, and this is plus. So which one is our demand between these two? Which one is our demand between these two? Our demand is which one?
The first quantity.
Demand is the one with the negative gradient. And here, which one is our supply? The one with the positive gradient, this one there. So supply is equal to demand at equilibrium. So 10 plus 3Q is equal to 50 minus 2Q. So 50 here, we subtract the 10. The 3Q here, when this one comes aside, to add 2Q plus 3Q. So what are we going to have here? 5Q is equal to what? Then how do we find the Q? We divide both sides by 5. So here we cancel this, we're going to get our Q. When we divide this in there, what are we going to get? 8.
8.
We substitute this 8 in any of these ones here. Since it's equilibrium, it will give you the same answer regardless of which equation you're going to pick. So where there is a Q, we put 8. So this will be 50 minus what? Minus 16. What do we get? Or if you want, you can substitute it in here. 10 plus 3Q. So this will be 10 plus what? 24. What do we get? We get 34. There we get 34. So let's sketch this together. This is the demand and this is supply. They meet where? At equilibrium here. Our price is here and our quantity is down there. What was our equilibrium price? 34. So we put 34 here. What was our equilibrium quantity? 8. We put 8 there. Quick, can you remember how did we say we illustrate graphs? Suppose we had 100 minus 2Q, and here we had 100 plus 2Q. How do we sketch these equations? I said you put the letters on one side. P plus 2Q is equal to what? 100. So if we're going to look at the intercepts, 1 into 100 is 100. So here it will be 100. 2 into 100, 50. So you cut the Q at 50. You do the same here. Put the letters on one side. P minus 2Q is equal to what? 10. So you get the intercepts. 1 into 10 is 10. Negative 2 into 10 is negative 5. So if you're going to sketch these ones on one diagram, start with the demand function. At P, it will cut at 100. We put this at 100 here. At Q, it will cut at 50. Put this one at 50. So this was the demand function. This one at P, it will cut at 10. Put it here at 10. Then the Q, negative 5, and negative 5 is somewhere here. So if you're going to draw this one, just joining these 2 points. So this is how the supply will look like, this, and the demand will look like this. So our demand was what? P is equal to 100 minus 2Q. And here our supply was what? P is equal to 10 plus what? 2Q. So this is how the sketching is done. So if we're going to go back to our question here, we need to sketch these two equations, 50 minus 2Q, 10 plus 3Q. So 50 minus 2Q and what? 10 plus 3Q. I want somebody to lead us through this. Who wants to try? Anyone who hasn't spoken? How do we sketch these two equations? Ladies especially.
Can I try?
Please.
Okay, so we bring 3Q on the other side, which is going to be minus. Let's go. It's going to be P minus 3Q, which is equal to 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Then we do, because obviously on P there's 1 there. So we do 1 into 10. So our P is going to be 10. And then 3 into 10, that is supposed to be what? 3.33. Yeah, negative 3 point, yeah, something like that. So that would be our Q. Then, okay, so now when we sketch the graph, our price, which is P, is going to be there. Then it's going, it will meet on 10. On the and then on the quantity side, it's going to be on the negatives. That's 3.3.
Good.
Yeah, and then the graph is going to stand like that.
Sloping.
So
Excellent.
This is a supply curve.
Excellent. Who wants to try the demand curve? Anyone who hasn't tried? Please, you understand more as you try. There's no answer which is wrong. Anyone else? Sharon? Chanda?
Hello.
Wanna try?
Yes. So we'll move the negative 2Q to the other side of the equation. So it will be P plus 2Q is equal to 50. So on P, we are going to put a 1 because it's the same as 1. So we'll divide 1 will go into 50.
Yes.
So that's going to be P will be equal to 50. Then 2 into 50, that will be 25. So Q will be equal to 25. So since it's a demand curve, on our P, we're going to put a 50 as the price. And then on our Q, we are going to put 25. And then we will draw the line to join them.
So collectively, we're going to combine these two on one graph. obviously you agree with me that this is going to be as follows. So here it will be 10. We don't usually consider the negative part here just for sketching purposes, but it will start at 10 going upwards. This one will start from what? 50 going down to 25, right? Then the point where they meet is called what? This point is called what?
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium. So we have 50 and 10. These are the key parts that you need you to take note of. So here we're able to now go back here. This is 50 and this is what? 10. Can somebody help us identify which one of these two is the consumer surplus and which one is the producer surplus? A is what? A is
Consumer surplus.
And B? Producer surplus, isn't it? So what is the
Maybe
formula?
just come again on the difference.
How
the
did
consumer,
you determine that?
Why? Yeah.
The area under the demand is called the consumer. In the notes that I was explaining just now to say, this area under the demand function is called the consumer surplus. This area under the what? Above the supply is called the producer surplus. So what is consumer surplus? And what is consumer, what is producer surplus and what is consumer surplus? So when you're talking about producer surplus, this is the amount above, below which a producer can sell. All right. So we're talking about an equilibrium at 7, and the consumer is able to want to sell it at 2. So this is called the producer surplus. Consumer surplus is the price above which the consumer is able to willingly pay. You know that the market price for tomato is for 7 kwacha. I can even pay what? 15 kwacha. So these surpluses, the area below the demand curve is called consumer surplus. The area above the supply curve is called the producer surplus. So here, our consumer surplus is A. Our producer surplus is B. So the formula is half PHI. So our base is the distance from here to here. What's the distance from here to here?
8.
8, correct. The height is the distance from here to here. What is the distance from here to here?
16.
16, correct.
16.
And when you multiply them, we get 64. The producer surplus also is half H. Our base is still 8. And what is our height from here to here?
24.
24. And try this one. What we get? 96. Isn't it? Then the total is called the what? The total is called the total surplus. When we add the consumer surplus and when we add the producer surplus, total, we get the total surplus. All right. Now, I want us to go to each of those slides have an exercise at the end. I want us to try this question together from what we have discussed. We're told that our market has the following: the demand and the supply. We're being asked to get the consumer surplus, the price and quantity. Let's just do part 1 together. Can we try this together? Okay, so please let's participate. Those that haven't spoken so much, I want you to be in line with what we are talking about. So we're given the following. Suppose the market is presented by the following demand and supply. What is our demand function? Demand is what? 12, P is equal to 12 minus 0.5 what? Q. And our supply is given by what? P is equal to 0.1 Q. Can somebody tell me what happens at equilibrium? At equilibrium, what happens?
P and S are equal.
Yes, at equilibrium, demand is equal to supply. So we're going to equate these ones. Who's going to equate this for us? Somebody, Philip and Sharon, take up. How do we equate these two? The demand is given by what? minus 0.5 Q. And our supply?
0.5 Q. 0.1 Q.
Good, 0.1 Q. So we need to solve for what? For Q. What next follows?
So we substitute the letters on one side and the numbers on one side.
Good, we rearrange them. So this is 0.5, we'll go this side, right? Comes a positive. Then the 0.1 is already positive. This side, we leave it as it is. So what are we going to have? 12 is equal to what?
0.6.
0.6, excellent. So how do we find Q?
Divide
Both sides by what?
both sides. 0.6.
0.6. Divide both sides by 0.6. So what do we get? Cancel here. Then here, what are we getting?
20.
20. So our equilibrium quantity is 20. So when we find our equilibrium quantity as 20, next what we do?
I think we substitute the 20 into the demand function so that we find P.
Into any of these two. Fine. And substitute the 20 into any of these two. So where there's Q, we can put a 20 there. What do we get? We get exactly 2. Suppose we use this other one. Are we still going to get the 2? Let's try that. So 0.5 times 20. So it will be 12 minus 10. What do we get? Is it the same answer? All right. Now the sketching. So we found our equilibrium price and our equilibrium quantity as 2 and 20. You can draw a small box here. Price is what? 2. Quantity is what? 20. Now for the demand, who wants to help us sketch it? Our demand function was what? 12 minus 0.5 Q. Anyone who hasn't spoken, please help us sketch this. How do you sketch the demand function? Come here.
So
Masaya. Continue.
okay, so we put the like items together, the letters. So we do P is P plus 0.5 Q is equal to 12. And then we find the common denominators there at the bottom. So P, which has got a 1. 1 into 12 is 12. And then 0.5 into 12, that is the 0.5 into 12, it's 24. Okay. Then we draw the graph.
Okay, how do we draw the graph?
Okay, so on the P side, on the P side, the graph is going to be at the point we are going to take is 12. And then on the Q side, the point will be 24.
Excellent. All right. Is he right?
Yes, he is.
All right, then let's go to our supply. Our supply is P is equal to 0.1 Q. What do we do? This one is tricky, but I explained it. Anyone who remembers?
I can try.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to put the like items together, the letters. So it is going to be P minus 0.1 Q is equal to 0.
Good.
Then 1 into 0 is 0. Negative 0.1 into 0, it's 0 as well.
So where would it start from?
From 0.0.
Yeah, from here, just from here, just upwards.
Yeah.
Is it right? Wow, that's good. Is it correct? So that's what we do. So this was our P is equal to 0.1 Q, and this was our P for demand, which was 12 minus what? 0.5 Q. What was our equilibrium price? What was our equilibrium price? 2. What was our equilibrium quantity? 20. So which one is our consumer surplus and which one is our producer surplus? X is our consumer surplus, right?
Yes.
So if we're going to illustrate the triangle for X, the base is what? 20. The height from here to here, what is our height? 10. If we're going to illustrate this one, the base is still 20. The height is what? 2. It is for Y for X. Is anyone lost in identifying the consumer surplus and producer surplus? Okay. So the consumer surplus, half times base times height, so 20, and our height is what? 10. So here we're going to get 100. The producer surplus, half times base, which is 20, times height, which is 2. We're going to get a what? This is 2, so we're going to get a 10. And when total up, we get 110. This is called our total surplus. So our total surplus is 110. All right, so this is how we do demand and supply. Let's say any questions?